Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I'm very happy to welcome an award-winning author. She's been an adjunct professor in literature. She edits, she ghostwrites. She's also a speech pathologist. She's the author of several books, including her latest, Spellbound by Murder. And most importantly, she's someone who I've been friends with for a very long time. Please help me welcome Stacie Ramey. Stacie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Well, so I was trying to figure out, so we've been friends for a long time. I said, so what is it? It's around 18 years now?
It's not that long, is it?
I think that
I started writing in 2009.
So it's not quite that. So it's just a little under. Are you
17? Don't age us
years.
even more. And I know you love pointing out that I'm older than you are. So, let's not go there.
Those are just facts. That's not pointing anything out. It's just stating facts.
Well, I don't think you have to revel in the fact that I'm 2 years older than you.
I'm not much younger than many people I know. So it's so before we get into anything, I like to start by going back with people. So where did you grow up, and what was your family life like, in particular with regard to Judaism?
Well, I mean, it's really hard to interview me, which you're going to find out right now, because I can't tell things in succession. I was born in New York.
Mm-hmm.
You know that. I'm a New Yorker. We only lived there for a very short time. When I was like 2 or 3, we moved to Connecticut, which I loved. Connecticut was my favorite place in the whole world. As a 3-year-old, to have a favorite place in the whole world is weird. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But I went to this preschool called Honey Hill. And it was just like lovely. There were trees. I just loved my life there. And then we moved to New Jersey. And in Connecticut and New Jersey, we belonged to the Jewish Community Center. And my Judaism was never really a question. It was just sort of what we did, You
observant at all in the house or nothing?
We did high holidays. On those holidays, we kept kosher-ish, like a kosher turkey, no meat and milk, that kind of stuff. So we kind of my dad grew up very, very observant. My mom grew up not observant at all. And interestingly enough, my mom grew up with, my grandmother was not a cook at all. My mother's mother was not a cook at all. And my dad's mother, who I didn't know for very long, she died when I was 2, was a fantastic cook. So they had vastly different backgrounds, and somehow mom managed to bridge the gap and learn to cook all the things that dad loved and all the traditional things. So, our Judaism was a lot about food, I guess. I think that's pretty clear. We went to the JCC. I went to religious school. I was reading Hebrew by the time I was 5. And I was reading English earlier than that. I taught myself to read when I was 3, which is weird, I know. But
that's when I started learning to read 3 years old. Same thing.
Yeah. It was just mom read books to us, and I love books, and I was tiny. I was a really little kid, and they would not want to give me books from the library because I was too small. But anyway, we then moved to Maryland, which my sister calls the Maryland experiment. And we moved to the part of Maryland was not Jewish at all, not at all. And I knew there was a problem because we turned on our street, and my mom said, there are 5 Jewish families on this street. And I thought, that is such a weird thing for mom to say, since when are we picking out our people, right? And she was very nervous about it too. I could tell there was something up. And of course, the kids were much younger than we were. And I found out pretty early on that it was weird to be Jewish in Stepford, Maryland, which is what Crofton was. It was a little village where they had gates to the village. Okay. You had to be let in and out, which back in the 70s was a weird thing. And they took the gates down. But I remember somebody in my elementary school said to me, yeah, the gates are supposed to keep out blacks and Jews. Mm-hmm. And I was like, interesting. Here's where we are.
Guess what? Yes.
Yeah. By the time I was in high school, it was, or junior high even, it was very apparent. We were kind of bused to this They didn't have a high school or junior high in my town, so we had to take a bus for like half an hour to Gambles, Maryland, which was right next to Fort Meade, which was a military base, and it was a very diverse school. The one thing it didn't have was Jews, though. There were 5 of us in the school of 2,500, and but in my house we were Jewish. We went to services. I joined youth group. I love going to youth group things. I love Kadima. I loved USY. I did sleepaway camp. I did USY Israel pilgrimage. I used to tell my dad on Friday nights I wanted to go to services. Like my Zeta would call, and he called every Friday at 5:30, and he'd say, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Dad won't take me to services, Zeta," and he'd be like, "Put him on the phone." So we did. And yes, I love going to see my friends there too. That was a big part of it. But I just love services. I always loved being there. We did religious school. We did Hebrew school Tuesday, Thursday, and Sundays. That was my Jewish life pretty much growing up.
So you learned to read Hebrew, but you never took it up to learn the language itself?
No, I am sort of learning it now, though, because my son is moving to Israel, and in August with his husband, they are going to play in the Haifa Symphony. And
yes.
Thank you. And so now it's like, if I have grandchildren, Israeli grandchildren, I don't want them to be able to make fun of me without me understanding it. So now it's imperative that I learn. Now, for Hebrew, for me, was like such an interesting thing, though. It was like a secret code, like you're sitting in services and you want to figure out where you are on the page, right? And to me, that was fun. It was like a game, and then they'd repeat verses, and everybody around me always seemed to know much more, though. Like that kind of bothered me. And when I went to camp, it was the same thing. Everybody really knew a lot more because there's so much to know. How do you know all of this? But I always loved Hebrew. I thought it was our special connection, and I still do. But no, I'd never learned that language. They didn't offer it. They didn't offer it in my high school. Weirdly,
no, they didn't offer it mine either. But yeah, I remember. I mean, I learned basics of it, and then I forgot most of it. But I was surprised at how much I remembered when I went to Israel a few years ago. So that's amazing. Stood out to me.
That's amazing.
So all right. So you just mentioned you were reading a lot as a child. So what was your favorite book as a child? I think I know the answer, but what was your favorite book?
Wait. My first favorite book? This is a hard question.
You were a child.
The very first book I read that I loved. Is that what you're asking me?
Okay, we can go with that way. So,
Where the Wild Things Are.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. I read it to myself, and I remember turning the pages and being amazed at how beautiful it was. But after that, I just read all the time. I read everything. I read much too early. I read everything, and my parents had this vast library. I read everything in there, which I should not have read many of those things at that time in my life, but I did. And Narnia, the Chronicles of Narnia, was one of my first favorite series. And I remember people in our community at our synagogue giving my mom trouble for that. Like, why are you letting her read a Christian allegory?
Right.
And I just remember my mom being like, she can read whatever she wants. Leave her alone. I don't care what she reads. My mom was the best. She really, one time at our library at Crofton was such a weird place. The librarian called and told on me that I was taking out books that I shouldn't be reading. And, it was back in the day with the phone attached to the wall, and all I could hear was the other mom's side of the conversation. And I knew what was happening, and, Mom said, Stacie's allowed to read whatever she wants. And she hung up the phone, and she looked at me and she said, don't let anybody ever tell you what to read or what to think. And I was like, yeah, Mom, like I won the lottery. I mean, I knew that anyway, but that was a good thing.
I love the Narnia books, and when I was reading them as a kid, nothing occurred to me that anything to do with Christianity whatsoever. It was only later on when I was an adult and read the tie-ins, like, okay, I could see it, but
I sort of love all like anything that's very sacred. I love, like it doesn't have to be Jewish. Like I went to a retreat. You went to this one the year after. I went to a retreat in Niagara Falls, and it was at a monastery, and there was this beautiful chapel made of wood,
right.
and it was gorgeous. And I had just lost my mom, and like 2 months before, I didn't even want to go, to this writer's workshop, but my friend had paid for my ticket and paid for my attendance. So I was like, I guess I have to. And I remember sitting in that chapel, just, it was quiet, it was wooden, it was beautiful, and it was just sacred. And so, I mean, I really
went
love
2 years in a row to that?
I did. I went the year before. Yeah. You want to talk about that workshop?
No, I won't. But it was beautiful. The place was beautiful there too. I really enjoyed just that experience of being inside of it, and with actual monks living there too.
I know, and I had to like restrain people from Florida who are used to going to like Disney World. This is not a character you can hug and take a picture with. There's no selfies here. But remember, there was like you weren't allowed.
I learned that after the restraining order. Yes.
Yeah. That was a little unfortunate. I didn't want to mention it was you, but do you remember there was they had taken a vow of silence, so we couldn't really talk in the hallways or anything, and but we could go to the artist's house next door and have parties. It was so funny.
So as a kid, when did you first take an interest in writing?
I didn't.
Better yet, when realize that you had a talent for it. You didn't.
I didn't. I didn't. This is where I am. I don't. So I have always felt like I have never fit in anywhere. And for the most part, I haven't minded that. You know what I mean? Like the people in Crofton were weird. I'm sorry, Crofton people, but you guys were weird. They wore, I won't even talk about what they wore, but the point is they were not like me. And I didn't care about that. I didn't try to fit in with them, definitely not in junior high and high school, and they made it very clear that I didn't fit in because I was Jewish. That was a real problem for them. Not sure why, but it really was. One time somebody stormed up to me and said, "Why can't you at least celebrate Easter?" And I'm like, do you know what Easter is? Like, do you know your own holiday? And I'm like, if I eat a chocolate bunny, we're cool. That's good. But anyway, in terms of writing, everybody at writing conferences, they're like, I wrote all the time. I wrote poems. I wrote this. I wrote that. I just read all the time. That's what I did. I didn't do any of that. I never thought I had been told by teachers and even at my master's level program at Penn State, I had professors who wanted me to write for them. And I just never thought I was that good. I was like, I could not be as good as the people that I love. Stephen King. I love Stephen King. I love John Steinbeck. I just read so much stuff that I just never thought and even the Archie comics, like my mom loved buying me those because that was like normal stuff to read as opposed to what I was reading. And it was 50 years of Betty or Veronica. Like, how did they sustain that? I still don't understand it. And I read every one. I was like, this is amazing. I need the new Archie comic. But yeah, I never thought I could write at all. And I didn't start writing till I was in my early 40s.
Oh, wow. So I had no idea that. So you just really, not only as an adult, is when you picked it up.
Well, I think I did try at one point in when I lived in Gainesville. I wrote some picture books because, you have your kids and you're so amazed by your children. And I wrote a book for each one of my children. And Andrew's Window was the first one. It was about, visiting my parents in North Carolina. He used to stare out the window all the time. And the twist is at the end, mom and dad come home because, it was just, I had no idea what I was doing. I wrote one for each one of my kids, but I didn't really start writing till right around when I met you.
Wow.
I started the month before or maybe 3 months before I started writing and going to an SCBWI critique group. Yeah. And they told me about the conference, and I said to my mom, well, there's this conference I should go to. And she's like, let's sign you up. And because I never knew what I wanted to do with my life. Like I never had any idea. And she was like relieved. You're 40, you finally figured it out. Okay, let's go.
I mean, I did write as a kid, and I think, I dabbled, I guess, in it off and on, but it's right around when I met you also. That's when I first started taking, I want to try this.
See, we're late bloomers, but we're doing okay. We're doing okay. Yeah.
So what made you decide to go for, you got an MFA in creative writing. So what made you decide to go for that then?
I just wanted to teach at the collegiate level. That's why. I had already been published. In fact, I had 2 books out by then. The Sister Pact and The Homecoming had been out. And at that particular program, it's a low residency program, and you're allowed to apply to accelerate your diploma, which meant you didn't need to attend as many semesters. So it was a huge cost saving advantage if you had been published, but you had to submit your published work to a committee, and they had to determine if it was good enough to be considered. And they did. They're like, yeah, this is good enough. And so I got to chop off 1 semester.
So all right, I'm curious though, has it impacted you at all? Like, have you something there that you took away from it that changed your approach to writing from taking these courses?
Oh, the MFA? Oh my God, the MFA was amazing. First of all, I was like, where was this when I was going to school? Okay, so perhaps a little insight into my crazy decision-making skills. When I was in Maryland, I didn't want to be in Maryland anymore. I wanted to be at Florida because I thought if I went to University of Florida, I'd be going to classes on the beach, which, by the way, Gainesville's not even close to a beach, right? So I didn't actually do my homework or look at a map. And I went there thinking I would do occupational therapy because, I was good with people. I liked kids, like I have always worked around kids my whole life. That is the one thing I knew I wanted to do, but I still had no idea what I wanted to do. And I got there, I started the OT program. They're like, you have to love your patients. I'm like, I don't even like a lot of people. I'm not loving everybody. So this is not for me. So I had already had like 24 credits going into college. So by 80 credits, you have to make a decision at UF at that point in time. I don't know if it's still true, or they kicked you out. And I loved college. I was not getting kicked out. So I chose speech pathology quickly because it was close to occupational therapy, but it seemed to be a lot less about loving your patients. Not that I don't love people. I would come off as a horrible person, but it's a commitment, right? I take those very seriously. And anyway, so I switched gears and I went to speech pathology. And while I was there, though, I took all these really cool courses. Like I took one class that only had 7 people in it, no tests, taught by this guy who was, very drugged out at the time, very much a hippie guy. It was called psycholinguistics. And all we had to do was read articles and talk about them. It was like amazing. Where was this my whole life? And then I took a British literature class that I did not need because the teacher was British and he read all of Shakespeare with an accent. So, and everybody around me was bored. I'm like, can you stop? He's reading, I just, so I made decisions like that. You know what I mean? I didn't actually think, what would I like to do? And of course, I never thought about writing. But if somebody had not said, like the question was, what do you want to do with your life, or what are you good at? If somebody had said, what do you love? It would have been reading, and that might have taken me down the path of going to a literature program, right? Mm-hmm. That might have been like the bright spots for me class wise in college had to do with language and reading, and why that didn't, trigger something in me at the time, I don't know. I was busy going out. I was busy having fun. I was dating a guy in a band. You know how that goes. And so when I did go back for my MFA, I was much older. I was 50, I think. And, which I know you guys are having a hard time believing that I could be older than that now, but it's true. I went to all the readings. I went to all, I loved the entire thing. They had Doug Wright come in. He wrote Quills and I Am My Own Wife. And he spoke to us 2 days in a row for 50 minutes. And I was like, this is what I should have been doing this whole time. I just love so many things about it. I met really great people there that I still keep in touch with. And they're a very supportive writing community as well, and which, is hard to come by sometimes in our case. And anyway, so what I took away from that are all the experiences. At one point, we got to go to a Franciscan. Is it a monastery? It's not a monastery. I guess so, monastery. And we got to hear the monks chant, the Gregorian chants. And I was like, I used to use that in my practice in Gainesville for speech pathology, Gregorian chants. And I was like, I actually am going to get to witness this. And it was amazing. And you can actually do like like a retreat there for free. You just make a donation and you stay there in on the grounds that are beautiful. But you have to get up at 5 every morning and chant with the monks, and you have to do all these things. And I was like, it'd be great to do a writer's workshop there where nobody could talk.
So monasteries have been very prominent in your life, I see, in your writing career.
Apparently. Yes. But anyway, so the MFA, really what I got out of it was, I was exposed to poetry, which I'm not really. We had Maggie Smith come. She was an amazing poet. That was incredible. The writing for children and young adults was my least favorite track, and I thought it would be my favorite track. So that was surprising to me because that's what I was doing at the time. But, I learned a lot from the mentors and the professors in the program, so it was worth it.
All right, well, okay, let me go back to your writing itself there. So I wanted to hear a little bit about the journey, which I know, I think most of it, but let me hear it from you, from the time you started taking writing seriously and went to pursue it to the time got your agent and the first book deal.
So I started writing a few months before I met you, and I went to that first conference back then, at the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, which is the worst acronym ever, a CBWI, had 2 conferences a year in Florida. There was one in Miami in January and one in Orlando in June, beginning of June. So I went to my first one. I didn't know I did. I knew Amanda, who led the critique group, but I didn't attach myself to her because I didn't think that was fair. Just because you're the only person I know, I'm gonna make you go around with me. I didn't do that. So I pretty much kept to myself, but I walked into that room and I thought for the first time in my life, I had found my people. This is maybe second time. The first time in my life was camp, USY camp. And the second time was these are the people I'm supposed to be around. Donna Gephardt, a mutual friend, was up there doing first books panel, which is where you, once your first book comes out, you go up and tell your story. So she was doing that, and I was like, I want to be her when I grow up, and I still do, honestly. She's still so prolific and so talented. But anyway, so at that workshop, I went to the bookstore and I just sort of looked at all the books. There were 2 books that appealed to me, and I bought them: Players and Waiting for June, both by Joyce Sweeney. And I didn't know who she was. I had no idea. I never met her. Never heard of her. People later, I found out, spoke of her in hushed tones, but at that time I didn't know anything about her. I met her in the elevator at the conference, and I said, "Yeah, you're the one to blame. I was up till 2 a.m. reading your book. Thanks." And that was it. And I also met another person right around that time. David Case, he lived in Wellington near me, and he wanted to start an SCBWI critique group. And I said, how can we do that? Neither one of us are published. And he's like, we'll just do it and see how it goes. And I had started going to critique groups by then, and so I sort of knew how they worked. And so we did start doing that. And one day he said to me, I'm going to try to get into Joyce Sweeney's classes. I'm like, the person who wrote those books I bought? And he's like, yeah, she has classes every week. And I'm like, I had no idea. So I wrote to Joyce and asked if I could join one of her classes, which ended up being at your house. And she said, I only have 1 spot left and 3 people want it. So send me your first 10 pages and good luck. And I did. And she's like, you're in. That was it. that was how I started writing. And from that point on, it became, I like to say it was like an obsession, because it was like you had to get the scene right, you had to get the chapter right, like how to plot. Like I didn't know what I was doing at all. Like I was cobbling together a writing education, as were you, and going to all these workshops, all these conferences, meeting writing mentors. I ended up going to the Nevada SCBWI mentorship program after meeting one of the mentors at a conference in June. And, we'd go, as you remember, and we'd submit 10 pages for critique, and we'd read in front of editors and agents, and we'd get feedback. And that's pretty much what I did for, on repeat. And I once actually tallied up all the time I spent doing, I did private critique groups, which you were part of. I did public critique groups. I did online critique groups. I did everything I could to try to make my writing better. And I did it all the time. And I tallied up the hours. It literally was 10,000 hours from the minute I started writing to when I got published. Like exactly 10,000 hours. So I was like,
it's not 10,000 hours in critique groups, right? I mean, just talking about the writing part.
Part of it in critique groups, part of it writing, yes.
Although we've been in some critique groups that felt like 10,000 hours. But
I was going to say that, but I was going to be kind.
Okay, so until how long did it take to get your agent?
Okay, so at that workshop that I was talking about in Niagara Falls, I met my first agent. He read, we were in critique groups together, and it was a very small workshop, and I ended up being in his group, which was planned. And his name was Josh Adams, and he signed me 6 weeks after that. And I thought, here I am, And it was funny because I had friends that were running the critique group, and they're like, he really likes your stuff. He's really into it. And so I was preparing all my, packets of papers to hand out. And I got so nervous. I started shaking. They all flew everywhere. And I couldn't get them in order, in the right order to hand them out, because I'm really dyslexic. And when I'm stressed out, nothing works, as you've witnessed many times, I think, in critique group. And so I handed it out, and all the pages were out of order. And I was reading, and people were like, it's out of order. It's out of order. And that was the critique they were giving me. And I was like, yeah, I know it's out of order. And then Josh was like, I know it's out of order, but I don't care. It's such good writing. And I was like, that was it for me. I fell hard, I will say. And he was my agent for 3 years, and he tried hard to sell my books. And so he would talk to me about, it went out to this editor, and there was an editor at that conference that was very interested also, but ultimately passed. And he's like, what are you writing now? And I was like, somebody's asking me what I'm writing. That's such a great feeling. So I would tell him, and he'd be like, no, write that one. So I started writing for Josh, which is a terrible thing to do. You should not write to market. You should write for yourself what you want to write. But I was young, and it was only like, what, 5 years in? 4 years in? I don't know. So ultimately he broke up with me. But I was feeling pretty unhappy. I'd been with him for 3 years, and I'd written this really horrible book called Expiration Date. And, when I say horrible, I don't mean it was poorly written, because I think it's actually very well written, but not to toot my own horn. But it had horrible things in it. And I don't know what possessed me to write it, but it was what I wanted to write. And he's like, yeah, I can't do this. And I actually felt relieved. My husband prior to that was like, you should be happier. You're following your dream. I'm like, my dream is awful. Why do you let me follow this dream? This is horrible. And when Josh broke up with me, I actually felt relieved. And I'm sure he did too, and I was like, I had been secretly working on a book that I knew he'd never take out. But it made me happy to write. So I started to get happy about writing again. And I thought it would take me like years to get another agent, because that had been my experience from friends watching them go through it. And So I started this ridiculous querying process. When you query, kids, don't do this at home. Don't try this at home. When you query agents, you're supposed to have maybe met them at a conference, know something about them, know if they're interested in the kind of work. You're supposed to not waste their time, right? But it was really hard to query again. You know, the query process is tough. So, so I sent to an agent who was considering me the same time Josh was, named Sarah, and I loved her. And she was like, I'm taking the whole summer off. If you're still not agented by fall, I'll look at anything Josh hasn't seen. So I was like, all right. So my query strategy was like starting with Sarah's. I decided I was going to send to every agent named Sarah in the business. And I didn't care if they rep children. I wasn't going to find out anything about them. So I sent out 5.
It seems like a logical method to go through. Yes.
So smart. Yes. So smart. Yes. So I sent out to 5 Sarahs, and every time I get a rejected, I'd send out to 5 more. And then I was going to do like the Michelles, the Jennifers, the Nicoles. Like I had a whole strategy worked out. That was my strat, and I was excited about it. And it was making me happy. I was entertaining myself, which is all of that has ever mattered, by the way. And as long as I'm entertained, life is good. And so a mutual friend of ours reached out to me and said, I know an agent who I think would be a really good fit for you. And this was somebody who was published and somebody who I really admired and respected, the person who called. And she said her name's Nicole Restanetti. And I wanted to say I'm not on the Nicoles yet, you know. First I had to do the Sarahs, and you can't tell people in the business that is how you're approaching your querying. You know, that's horrible. It's demeaning. It's disrespectful. It's irreverent. It's so many things. So I took the name, and typically when somebody gives you a referral like that, you're supposed to say, this person referred me in the subject so that you have a better chance of being plucked out of the slush pile. But I was not going to do that because that was disrupting my entertainment. So I just sent, and it was on June 27th. I know that for sure because it was, my mom had already passed and her birthday was June 28th. And I sent a cold query to Nicole, and it was the first 5 pages. And I went to see my daughter play in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory at a theater in Lake Worth, and my boys and I were on our way. My husband and I had seen it the day before, and I get an email. I'm stuck in traffic, and the kids are like, don't look at your phone, Mom. I'm like, I can't drive, right? And I look, and it's from Nick saying, I really love this. I'd like to have the whole manuscript, but I need an exclusive. And I was like, what? And the thing is, because she was named Nicole and not Sarah, I knew exactly who it was. That was the thing. I knew who it was. I was like, because at first I was like, oh, another rejection. And she requested it, and the next 2 days later, she signed me.
Wow, amazing.
And then a couple of weeks after that, she sold the book, the same one that
sold pretty quickly. I remember that, right?
That Josh wasn't able to sell. Of course, the premise had been tweaked some, but he didn't want to see the tweaks on the. I mean, our story had played out. And I've been with Nicole ever since.
All right, so let's move on to the current project. But before we talk about Spellbound, by Murder, which is a cozy mystery, first, for those who don't know, what is a cozy mystery, and what is it about the genre that drew you to wanting to write one? Because you have not written one in this genre before.
So I burst onto the scene writing edgy YA, right? Very realistic, dark stuff, right? A cozy mystery is the complete antithesis of that. I can't say words a lot of times, so you know that about me. It is set in a small town, typically. It has a interesting cast of characters. It may be surrounding some kind of hobby that's interesting, like cheese making or, some other component that kind of draws you in. But there's a murder and it has to be solved, but there's no gore on the page. There's no, it's not a spicy book. It's just like, drinking a glass of warm tea. So
it's a fun murder.
It is a fun murder. And you're glad because the person who dies is not a nice person. Right. And you don't really, it's not like I said, it's not so. I read a lot of Stephen King. It's not Stephen King, I will say. So what drew me to that is, I had published 4 books in the young adult world. My editor had left, come back, left, come back. I had been bounced around, and books had been stranded or orphaned, which I think is a terrible term. Actually, I hate using it. So I think this is the last time I'm going to say it. But that means your editor has left the house, so there's no support for your book anymore. So you can kiss that book goodbye, pretty much.
That
And
seems unusual. That must not happen a lot.
I know, it's very strange. Did that happen to you? I think
never. Yes.
No. So it had been a long time, and I had been trying other projects, and the world had become a very dark place. And prior to all of this, I had been at ALA. Sourcebooks, who were the publishers of my YA books, sent me to ALA, and which is a big conference, and it was fun being there. And I met some people there that I'm still friends with today. Jeff Strand, you know him, and James Ponte, who always has so much fun, Like, I remember there's like always at the end of the conference, you're sitting there signing books for people who come, librarians who come to buy your books. And he always had a really long line, and it's awkward. It's a little awkward, right? You're sitting there going, oh, is that for me? Is that for me? Right. And you don't want to do that. And I remembered even in those moments, I'm like, I'm just going to have fun. If people are here for my book, that's great. I know I'm connecting with some people, who are rabid fans, but what if I wrote something fun? That was where that thought came to me. What if I wrote something that was just fun? And with everything that has happened in the world the last few years, I really just needed a break. Also, I grew up watching a lot of cozy mysteries. I watched Murder, She Wrote, and I actually thought when I started writing, my life would be Murder, She Wrote. I'd be sitting at my table, typing away, drinking tea. I drink coffee mostly, but I do drink tea sometimes. And I'd be living in New England, weirdly, and I live in Florida. And solving murders, like casually, while I'm like riding my bike to buy fish at the local fish market, like that's what I thought my life was going to be like. I love Columbo. I love, I guess that isn't so cozy, but sort of cozy and compared to today's standards. And, I always loved that. And on a very dark Zoom call with my agent, who was like, so do you want to do IP work? And I'm crying, I'm not a big crier, but I was crying. And because I hadn't sold anything in a long time. And I was like, that's it, I'm done, I have nothing. And she's like, I'd like to see you in a cozy. And I'm like, what? Like, are you like dressing me now? Like, what's going on here? And she's like, you just have the sense of humor for it, and whatever. And so I started reading a lot of cozy mysteries, and they're good. They're fun. I
do love cozy mysteries, yes.
They just don't spike the adrenaline in you. They don't make you feel bad, And I was like, maybe this is what I'm looking for. So I spent 4.5 years sending her first 50 pages of like 7 different concepts. And she's like, no. And I finally sent her the one for Spellbound. And she's like, I love this. And with like all caps and exclamation points and maybe some language that you couldn't use in a cozy. I duck and love this, And Nick, when she loves something, that's when she sells it, right? And I revised it a couple of times with her, the beginning of it, and I sent it to her, and it sold in 2 weeks.
That's fantastic. So tell me specifically now about Spellbound.
Okay, so Spellbound, wait, maybe I can have my little helper get me one of the books to hold up.
Yes.
I should have done that.
Well, I'll put the graphic up anyway, but yes, get the book.
Yeah. I'm really terrible at this promotional stuff. So Spellbound by Murder was inspired by Gilmore Girls. I loved Gilmore Girls. I have 2 boys, 2 sons, and a daughter. And it was 5 years between here it is, here's the cover, between my middle son and my daughter. And so I just love watching that show. And at first the dialogue is amazing. The writing is really good. and it's the banter is incredible, and it is actually the way we talk in my house. Like a lot of what I put in the book came directly from my children's mouths, like things that, like, my son calls me the hyperbole queen, like hyperbole, but like make it like Super Bowl, like, so that's in there. And like it just felt very real and very close to me. So this book is kind of inspired by Gilmore Girls and also Charm, because my daughter watched that when she was growing up, and those are really good memories for me. And but it's a single mother moves from South Florida. I'm always hoping to move out of South Florida. Like every time somebody I know moves, I'm like, God, how? That's amazing. So it's aspirational for me because they moved to Connecticut to help her grandmother run her family bookstore called Mystic Hollow Books in Mystic Hollow, Connecticut. Once again, back to Connecticut, which I loved. It's a town that's known for, the inhabitants kind of know that they have mystical properties. There's a spring nearby. There's cold plunge baths filled with the Mystic Springs water, and it like they heal you. But it's sort of tongue in cheek. Like everybody sort of talks about it, but the etiquette is you don't ask. Do you dabble? Like whatever. So she moves her very kind of unhappy 17-year-old daughter to Mystic Hollow, Connecticut. And her daughter falls in love with the town and with her grandmother, and with the magic, and everything's going really well. But there's a big box store that wants to run Mystic Hollow Books out of town and take over. And the person who runs that store, Almira Leach, is kind of gunning for Veronica and her grandmother. And but so she tries to undermine her at every turn. And Mystic Hollow Books is putting on a literary festival, and the keynote speaker drops out last minute. Veronica, who is an aspiring writer, invites one of her sometime crush, who's like the it boy in publishing. We know how that goes, right? The it boy in publishing to come do the keynote. And while he's there, he's killed. And Veronica's framed for the murder, so she has to help the local sheriff figure it out. So that's it.
So are there plans for more in the series?
Well, I did write the next, I have the first 3 books planned. I did write the proposal for the second book, but Crooked Lane does not make decisions until they see data. So hopefully there'll be a second book.
So we should run out and make sure to get a copy quick.
Yes, please, everybody, please buy a book. I need a second book in the series. Don't make me a one-hit wonder.
Any preference for you right now with YA and writing cozy mysteries for adults?
Definitely cozy. And I'm actually working on some other very serious projects that have nothing to do with cozy and nothing to do with teenagers. But I really feel like I've aged myself out of the YA universe. I am still working on one very mystical Jewish YA. Where teens unwittingly call on Abazu. They're trying to invoke Lilith, who is much maligned. Instead, they call her, they accidentally call on her daughter, who is the child stealer, and one of the characters, her little sister, is taken. So I am working on that, but I think that's going to take a long time, and it's not really. I don't necessarily want to be in the young adult space anymore. I really love the adult space. It's new, it's fun. And I'm also working on a very serious project that I cannot talk about that I'm so excited about. My biggest project to date, that has, it's a Jewish project, and I'm super excited about it. But it is not cozy, and it is not a mystery.
Then since I know what it is, hopefully it all goes through, and we'll talk again about it here. So
I hope so.
It comes to fruition. And most important question for everyone that comes on: how can people follow you on social media?
I'm not really sure. I don't know. How do you follow me? Do you follow me on social media? Jonathan?
I think right before you were coming on, I went and did it again.
Yeah. So I do have somewhat of a presence on Instagram. It's just my name, Stacie Ramey, with an underscore. My daughter and her friend set that up. I don't know. I paid them like years ago. I don't want to do any of this. I do sometimes go on Twitter. It's just at Stacie Ramey. I do have a Facebook presence, but I'm not loving Facebook these days. So you can maybe try to find me there. I put out a Substack essay like twice a month, and it's at Stacie Ramey. It's called Write Cozy. It used to be Write Hard because I wrote edgy things. So now I just have a slash through hard and put cozy there because, that's the way I roll.
Well, let's hope Spellbound by Murder does fantastically. I can't wait to get my copy at your signing.
Yes, I'm signing in Wellington, Florida at the Barnes & Noble on March 28th from 2 to 4 if you guys can make it. Or at Sanford, Florida, March 19th at 7 o'clock at Spellbound Bookstore.
Well, Stacie, thanks for coming on. Like I said, we've been friends for a long time. I'm excited for you. I'm glad you're getting this new venture instead of toiling in the other one. So, and hopefully Spellbound by Murder does great.
Thank you very much.
Well, again, this has been The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. Again, a very special thanks to Stacie Ramey. Go pick up Spellbound by Murder. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.